In the vast expanse of the galaxy, where civilizations rise and fall like cosmic tides, there exists a truth that has echoed through millennia. Humans are considered the weakest species in the known universe. Their planet Earth sits on the very edge of civilized space, a backwater world whose inhabitants possess no natural telepathy, no energy manipulation abilities, no enhanced physical prowess, and certainly no magical talents that define the galaxy's elite. For 3,000 years, the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences has stood as the ultimate proving ground for the universe's most gifted beings. Only the top 0.001% of each species population receives an invitation to this legendary institution where future leaders, warriors, and cosmic guardians are forged. The Academy's entrance requirements are so stringent that even being nominated is considered the highest honor a being can receive. No human has ever been invited. No human has ever even been considered until a catastrophic clerical error changes everything. When 17-year-old Sarah Chen receives a golden invitation sealed with the Academy's cosmic insignia, everyone assumes it's either a prank or a mistake. Sarah herself laughs it off. After all, she's just an ordinary girl from suburban California who struggles with basic calculus and can barely run a mile without getting winded. The idea that she could compete alongside beings who can bend reality with their minds seems absurd. But when Galactic Academy officials arrive to investigate the error, they discover something that will shake the very foundations of what the universe believes about humanity. Sarah's enrollment wasn't a mistake, it was destiny calling. And what happens next will prove that sometimes the greatest strength lies not in what you can do, but in what you refuse to give up trying to do. Welcome to a story where being underestimated becomes the ultimate weapon, where human stubbornness meets cosmic impossibility, and where one girl's journey will redefine what it means to be the strongest in the galaxy. Sarah Chen was having the worst day of her 17 years when the universe decided to completely upend her life. She sat at her desk in AP Physics, staring at a test paper covered in red ink, when Principal Martinez's voice crackled through the intercom speakers. "Sarah Chen, please report to the main office immediately." 28 pairs of eyes turned toward her, and Sarah felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. She gathered her backpack and shuffled toward the door, ignoring the whispered speculation from her classmates. The hallways of Westfield High School stretched endlessly before her, lined with motivational posters that felt like mockery given her current academic situation. The main office buzzed with its usual chaos of ringing phones and harried administrators, but Sarah noticed something different immediately. Standing beside Principal Martinez's desk were two figures who definitely didn't belong in suburban California. One was tall and impossibly graceful, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The other appeared more humanoid but had eyes that held depths like looking into space itself, dark, infinite, and filled with distant stars. "Sarah," Principal Martinez said, his voice carrying an odd mixture of confusion and awe. "These are representatives from—" He paused, consulting a piece of paper as if he couldn't quite believe what he was reading. "The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, Sarah." "The what now?" The silver-skinned being stepped forward with fluid movements that seemed to defy gravity. When it spoke, its voice resonated with harmonic frequencies that made Sarah's bones vibrate. "Greetings, Sarah Chen, of Earth. I am Coordinator Zixthala of the Voidani Collective. This is my colleague, Professor Nethvar of the Astral Dominion." The being gestured toward the star-eyed figure. "We have come regarding your enrollment at the Academy." My what? Sarah looked between the aliens and her principal, who appeared as bewildered as she felt. "I think there's been some kind of mistake. I didn't apply to any academy. Actually, I'm pretty sure I'm about to fail physics, so whatever academy you're talking about probably wouldn't want me anyway." Professor Nethvar's stellar eyes focused on her with an intensity that made Sarah feel like she was being examined at a molecular level. "There has been no mistake, young human. Your name appeared on the Academy's enrollment Crystal 3 rotations ago, inscribed in letters of pure cosmic energy." Such manifestations are extremely rare and have never been wrong in the Academy's 3,000-year history. But I don't understand, Sarah protested. What even is this Academy? And why would my name just appear somewhere? That doesn't make sense. Coordinator Zixthala reached into what appeared to be a fold in space itself and withdrew a golden envelope that seemed to pulse with its own inner fire. The envelope bore a seal that hurt to look at directly, a symbol that suggested vast cosmic forces and infinite knowledge. The Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, Zixthala explained, is the premier institution of higher learning in the known galaxy. We train the finest minds and most capable beings from across thousands of worlds. Our graduates become leaders of civilizations, guardians of cosmic order, and shapers of reality itself. Sarah stared at the envelope. And you think I belong there? Have you seen my grades? I got a C- in freshman biology because I couldn't remember the difference between mitosis and meiosis. I'm not exactly Academy material. The Academy's selection process transcends traditional academic metrics, Professor Nethvar said. We evaluate potential, not just current knowledge. The enrollment crystal responds to beings who possess certain qualities that may not be immediately apparent even to the individual themselves. Principal Martinez cleared his throat. With trust, Teddy, I hate to interrupt, but could someone explain how this is even possible? I mean, aliens showing up at my school wasn't exactly covered in my administrative training. Coordinator Zixthala tilted its head in what might have been amusement. Your species has remained isolated from the broader galactic community by choice. The Galactic Council established protocols for your world's protection centuries ago. However, Academy enrollment supersedes those protocols. When a being is selected, they must be contacted regardless of their world status. Selected for what exactly? Sarah asked, though she was beginning to suspect she didn't really want to know the answer. For the Academy's advanced program in multidimensional sciences and cosmic engineering, Zixthala replied. The curriculum includes advanced energy manipulation, quantum consciousness studies, temporal mechanics, reality architecture, and applied universal theory. Sarah laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed off the office walls. I don't even know what half those words mean. This has to be some kind of joke. The Academy does not joke, Professor Nethvar said solemnly. Your enrollment has been confirmed by the highest authorities. Transport to the Academy will commence in 72 of your hours. Wait. What? Sarah's voice cracked. You expect me to just leave Earth in 3 days? To go to space school? This is insane. The invitation cannot be declined, Zixthala explained gently. Academy selection is both an honor and an obligation. However, we understand this may be overwhelming. For a being from an isolated world, we can provide preparation materials to help ease the transition. Sarah sank into one of the office chairs, her mind reeling. Let me get this straight. You're telling me that some cosmic crystal decided I should go to the galaxy's most advanced school, where I'll be competing with alien geniuses who can probably solve equations with their minds while I'm still trying to figure out basic trigonometry? That is essentially correct, Professor Nethvar admitted. And there's no way out of this? None. Sarah closed her eyes and tried to process everything. When she opened them again, both aliens were watching her with expressions that might have been sympathy, though it was hard to tell with their non-human features. What happens if I fail? She asked quietly. When I fail, because, let's be honest, that's definitely going to happen. Failure at the Academy? Rare, Zixthala said carefully. The selection process is extremely accurate. If you have been chosen, it is because you possess the capability to succeed. But I don't feel capable of anything, Sarah said. I'm just a regular person. I get nervous speaking in front of the class. I cry when I watch sad movies. I can't even drive a car without getting anxious, and you want me to travel through space? Perhaps, Professor Nethvar said slowly, that is precisely why you were chosen. Before Sarah could ask what that meant, the moment her fingers touched it, Sarah felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had ever experienced. For just an instant, she saw flashes of images, vast academies floating in space, beings of incredible power and knowledge, technologies that defied imagination, and somehow, impossibly, herself standing among them. "The Academy ship will arrive to collect you in 3 days," Zixthala said. "Prepare what belongings you wish to bring, though most necessities will be provided. Your family will be contacted and appropriate explanations given." "What kind of explanations?" Sarah asked weakly. "That you have been selected for an extremely prestigious advanced studies program," Professor Nethvar replied, "which is entirely accurate." As the two aliens prepared to leave, Sarah realized she was still holding the golden envelope. "Wait!" she called after them. "What if I'm not what you're looking for? What if this really is a mistake?" Coordinator Zixthala paused at the door. In 3,000 years, the enrollment crystal has never been wrong. "You are exactly what the Academy needs, Sarah Chen of Earth. The question is whether the Academy is what you need." After they left, Sarah sat in the eerily quiet office with Principal Martinez, both of them staring at the golden envelope as if it might explode. "This is really happening, isn't it?" Sarah asked. Principal Martinez nodded slowly. "I think so. Though I'm going to need to call your parents and explain why their daughter is about to leave the planet for school." "Good luck with that," Sarah muttered. She opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in text that seemed to shift and change languages as she read it, somehow always remaining perfectly comprehensible. "Greetings, Sarah Chen," she read aloud. "You have been selected to attend the Galactic Academy of Advanced Sciences, the premier institution of higher learning in the known universe. Your studies will commence immediately upon arrival and will encompass advanced concepts in energy manipulation, dimensional theory, consciousness studies, and practical applications of universal forces. Dormitory assignment and class schedules will be provided upon enrollment. Transport arrives in 3 rotations. Welcome to your destiny." Sarah looked up at her principal. "Mr. Martinez, what am I supposed to tell my parents? Hey, Mom and Dad, aliens showed up and I have to go to Space University now?" "Maybe start with the prestigious program part and work your way up to the space travel," he suggested weakly. That evening, Sarah sat at her family's dinner table trying to explain the day's events to her parents. Her mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, was a pediatrician who dealt with impossible situations daily but seemed completely out of her depth. Her father, David Chen, was an engineer who prided himself on logical thinking and kept asking for technical specifications that Sarah couldn't provide. "So these aliens," her mother said carefully, "they just showed up at your school and told you that you're going to space." "That's basically accurate," Sarah confirmed. "And there's no way to decline this invitation?" "Apparently not." Her father leaned back in his chair. "Sarah, honey, I know you've been stressed about college applications and your grades, but this seems like quite an elaborate fantasy to avoid." "Dad!" Sarah pulled out the golden envelope, which was still glowing faintly. "Does this look like something I could have made up?" David reached for the envelope and immediately jerked his hand back as if he'd been shocked. That's definitely not normal." "The whole thing isn't normal," Sarah said. "But it's happening whether we understand it or not." Her mother was quiet for a long moment. "If this is real, and I'm not saying I believe it yet, but if it is, then we need to think about what this means for your future. This could be the opportunity of a lifetime. Or it could be a complete disaster where I embarrass myself in front of the entire galaxy," Sarah pointed out. "You've never backed down from a challenge before," her father said. "Remember when you joined the debate team even though public speaking terrified you? You ended up making it to state championships? This is slightly different from debate team, Dad. These are aliens who can manipulate reality with their minds. And apparently," her mother said, "they think you belong among them." Over the next 3 days, word of Sarah's selection somehow spread throughout the school despite the administration's attempts at secrecy. Some students thought it was an elaborate hoax, others were convinced she'd had some kind of breakdown, but a few seemed genuinely excited for her. "I can't believe you're going to space," her best friend Maya exclaimed during lunch on Sarah's final day. "You have to promise to tell me everything when you get back." "If I get back," Sarah corrected grimly, "for all I know, I'll wash out in the first week and they'll send me home in shame." "Or," Maya said, "you'll discover that you're actually some kind of secret genius and become the first human to graduate from Alien Harvard." "Alien Harvard," Sarah repeated. "That's actually not a bad way to think about it. Just remember us, little people, when you're ruling the galaxy," Maya joked. But Sarah could see the worry in her eyes. That night, Sarah packed a single suitcase with her most essential belongings: clothes, a few photos, her journal, and her father's old mechanical watch that she'd worn for luck since middle school. As she folded each item, she tried to imagine what her life would be like in just 24 hours. The Academy ship arrived exactly when promised, though ship seemed an inadequate term for the massive crystalline structure that materialized in the empty field behind Sarah's house. It was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, a geometric marvel that seemed to exist in more dimensions than Sarah's eyes could process. Coordinator Zixthala and Professor Nethvar emerged from an opening that appeared seamlessly in the ship's surface. They were accompanied by a third being that looked vaguely reptilian, but moved with surprising grace. "Sarah Chen," Zixthala said. "Are you prepared for departure?" Sarah looked back at her parents, who were trying very hard to appear supportive despite their obvious fear and confusion. She hugged them both tightly, breathing in the familiar sense of her mother's perfume and her father's aftershave. "I love you both," she whispered. "I'll find a way to stay in touch." "We believe in you, sweetheart," her mother said through tears. "You're stronger than you know." As Sarah walked toward the alien ship with her single suitcase, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was making a terrible mistake. Every rational part of her mind screamed that she was completely unprepared for whatever lay ahead. But beneath the fear and uncertainty was something else, a tiny spark of excitement at the thought that maybe, just maybe, the universe saw something in her that she had never seen in herself. The ship's interior defied physics in ways that made Sarah's head spin. Corridors seemed to stretch infinitely in directions that shouldn't exist, and the walls displayed what appeared to be real-time views of distant galaxies. Her assigned quarters were small but comfortable, with a bed that adjusted to her body temperature and a window that showed the slowly shrinking Earth below. As the Academy ship entered hyperspace and Earth disappeared into a tiny point of light, Sarah pressed her face against the window and whispered a promise to herself. "Whatever happens next, I'm going to find out why they chose me, and I'm going to prove that humans belong among the stars." Little did she know that her presence at the Academy would soon challenge everything the galaxy thought it knew about strength, intelligence, and the power of refusing to give up. The universe was about to discover that sometimes the greatest force in existence isn't the ability to manipulate energy or bend reality. It's the simple human determination to keep trying when everyone expects you to fail. The Academy station hung in space like a jewel crafted by gods who had never heard of the word impossible. Sarah pressed her nose against the transport shuttle's viewport, watching as the massive structure grew larger with each passing moment. What she had initially taken for a single building revealed itself to be an entire city floating in the void, with towers that twisted through dimensions and platforms that defied gravity as casually as Earth buildings defied common sense. "Magnificent, is it not?" said her shuttle companion, a being that looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a mathematician. Its name was Krethax, and it had introduced itself as a third-year student from the dimensional engineering track. "I still remember my first glimpse of the Academy. Of course I was prepared for it. My people have sent students here for over 1,000 years." Sarah nodded weakly, trying not to think about how her own people hadn't even known the Academy existed until 3 days ago. Through the viewport, she could see other shuttles approaching the station, carrying beings of every conceivable shape and description. Some floated in spheres of liquid, others existed as pure energy contained in crystalline shells, and a few seemed to be made of living metal that reformed itself continuously. "You must be very excited," Creotax continued, its compound eyes reflecting the Academy's lights like fractured rainbows. "What is your species' specialty? Energy manipulation? Quantum consciousness? Temporal mechanics?" Sarah said. "We're really good at stubborn." Creotax's head tilted at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. "I am not familiar with that discipline." "Is it a form of advanced mental conditioning?" "Something like that," Sarah muttered, deciding not to explain that humans mostly used stubbornness to argue about sports and refused to ask for directions. The shuttle docked with a barely perceptible shudder, and Sarah found herself stepping into the most overwhelming space she had ever experienced. The Academy's main receiving hall was vast beyond comprehension, with a ceiling that seemed to show actual stars rather than artificial lighting. Hundreds of students moved through the space in groups, their conversations creating a symphony of sounds that included languages made of mathematics, music, and what appeared to be controlled explosions. Sarah clutched her single suitcase and tried to look like she belonged, which was roughly as effective as trying to disguise a goldfish at a shark convention. A floating crystal approached her, pulsing with soft blue light. "Sarah Chen, human Earth origin," the crystal said in a voice like wind chimes. "Welcome to the Academy. I am Guide Crystal Lumenia. Please follow me for orientation and dormitory assignment." As they moved through the halls, Lumenia provided a running commentary on the Academy's features. The Academy currently houses approximately 50,000 students from across 647 different species and dimensional planes. The main academic complex contains 12,000 classrooms, each capable of adjusting its physical properties to accommodate different forms of learning. "Physical properties?" Sarah asked, jogging slightly to keep up with the floating crystal. "Certainly. Some students learn best in zero gravity. Others require immersion in liquid methane, and a few need to experience concepts across multiple time streams simultaneously. The Academy adapts to all learning styles." It passed a classroom where students who looked like living nebulae were apparently having a heated debate with beings made of crystallized sound. Through another doorway, Sarah glimpsed students practicing what appeared to be reality sculpture, reshaping the very fabric of space-time with casual gestures. "This is incredible," Sarah breathed, then immediately felt stupid for stating the obvious. "Yes," Lumenia agreed, "though perhaps you should reserve judgment until after your first examinations. The Academy's standards are quite rigorous." They arrived at a dormitory complex that seemed to exist in a state of controlled impossibility. The building's architecture shifted constantly, floors rearranging themselves to accommodate the needs of different species. Sarah's room was on what Lumenia called the baseline physics level, which was apparently where they housed students who required normal gravity, standard atmospheric pressure, and time that moved in only one direction. "Your schedule will be transmitted directly to your neural interface once it's installed," Lumenia explained. "My what interface?" Sarah asked, but the crystal had already floated away, leaving her alone in a room that was somehow both alien and surprisingly comfortable. The space was larger than her bedroom at home, with walls that displayed slowly shifting patterns of Earth-like scenery. A desk that appeared to be grown rather than built occupied one corner, and the bed looked like it had been designed by someone who had studied human anatomy for approximately 10 minutes and done their best. Sarah unpacked her meager belongings, placing her father's watch on the desk and arranging her few photos where she could see them. The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. In a few hours, she would be attending classes with beings who could manipulate the fundamental forces of reality, while her greatest academic achievement was a B+ in AP English. A chiming sound drew her attention to what appeared to be a communication panel on the wall. A message was displaying in text that helpfully translated itself as, she read, "Mandatory neural interface installation scheduled for 1400 hours, Medical Bay 7. Failure to attend will result in inability to access Academy systems and automatic academic probation." Neural interface, Sarah repeated to herself. They want to put something in my brain. The medical bay turned out to be a space that redefined Sarah's understanding of the word sterile. Everything was white and gleaming, but the white seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal, creating an effect that was either beautiful or disturbing depending on your perspective. Sarah was leaning toward disturbing. Sarah Chen, said a voice that sounded like crystallized water. Sarah turned to see a being that appeared to be made entirely of translucent blue material, flowing like liquid but maintaining a roughly humanoid shape. I am Dr. Fluxara, the Academy's chief xenobiological specialist. I will be performing your neural interface installation. Is it going to hurt? Sarah asked, because sometimes the direct approach was best. Pain is a relative concept, Dr. Fluxara replied, which was not remotely reassuring. For your species, the installation should feel similar to experiencing a mild headache while someone rewrites the fundamental nature of your consciousness. Quite tolerable, really. That doesn't sound tolerable at all. The interface is necessary for academy attendance, Dr. Fluxara explained, gesturing for Sarah to sit in what looked like a dentist's chair designed by aliens with too many arms. It provides access to the Academy's information networks, translation protocols, and basic survival systems. Without it, you would be unable to understand 90% of your coursework or communicate with most of your fellow students. Sarah sat in the chair, which immediately adjusted itself to her body in ways that felt disturbingly intimate. Have you ever installed one of these in a human before? You are the first human to attend the academy, Dr. Fluxara said, producing what appeared to be a device that existed in several dimensions simultaneously. However, your neural architecture is remarkably similar to that of the Terranian species, and we have installed thousands of interfaces in Terranians. The risk of permanent damage is quite low. How low is quite low? Approximately 7%. Sarah closed her eyes. Just do it before I change my mind. The installation felt exactly like having someone rewrites the fundamental nature of her consciousness while suffering from a mild headache, which was to say it was indescribable and definitely not tolerable. For several minutes, Sarah experienced sensations that her brain had no framework for processing. Colors that didn't exist, sounds that bypassed her ears entirely, and the distinct feeling that her thoughts were being carefully reorganized by a very polite but insistent alien presence. When it was over, Sarah opened her eyes to find that the world had changed. Not visually, everything looked the same, but she could now perceive information streams flowing through the air like visible currents. Text appeared in her field of vision when she focused on objects, providing details about their composition, origin, and function. Most startling of all, she could understand every conversation happening in the medical bay, despite the fact that the speakers were using languages based on electromagnetic frequencies and crystalline harmonics. The interface is functioning perfectly, Dr. Fluxara observed. Remarkably, your neural patterns are adapting to the technology more quickly than we projected. Most students require several days to achieve full integration. Is that good or bad? Sarah asked, though she was distracted by the flood of information now available to her. The chair she was sitting in, according to her new interface, was manufactured on a planet called Nexus Prime and was designed to accommodate 17 different types of nervous system. It is interesting, Dr. T. Fluxara said. You may go. Your first class begins in 1 hour. Sarah made her way to Academic Complex 7, following navigation prompts that appeared directly in her visual field. The building was a marvel of impossible architecture, with corridors that led in directions that geometry insisted couldn't exist. Students of every conceivable species moved through the halls, their conversations now perfectly comprehensible thanks to her neural interface. Did you hear about the human? She heard a crystalline being saying to its companion. Apparently it was enrolled by accident. Poor creature, replied what appeared to be a sentient gas cloud. I heard its species doesn't even have natural telepathic abilities. How is it supposed to pass advanced energy manipulation? Sarah quickened her pace, trying to ignore the whispered conversations that seemed to follow her everywhere. She found classroom 847B just as a chiming sound indicated the beginning of the class period. The room was larger than most Earth auditoriums, with seating that defied physics to accommodate beings of wildly different sizes and requirements. Sarah took a seat near the back, hoping to remain inconspicuous among students who included living plasma, sentient mathematics, and what appeared to be a small moon with eyes. "Welcome to Introduction to Cosmic Forces," said the instructor, a being that looked like a galaxy compressed into humanoid form, complete with actual stars twinkling in its chest cavity. "I am Professor Void Seer. Before we begin, I understand we have a special student today, the first human to attend the academy." Every eye, optical sensor, and perception organ in the room turned toward Sarah. She felt her face burning with embarrassment and wished she could sink through the floor. "Sarah Chen," Professor Void Seer continued, "would you please stand and tell us about your species' approach to energy manipulation?" Sarah stood on shaking legs, acutely aware that she was about to reveal just how unprepared she was. We use electricity for lights and computers, and we burn things for heat, but we mostly just push things around with our hands." The silence that followed was deafening. Several students made sounds that her interface translated as expressions of disbelief and pity. "Fascinating," Professor Void Seer said finally. "A purely mechanical approach to environmental interaction. How delightfully primitive. Tell me, how does your species achieve faster than light travel without energy manipulation capabilities?" "We don't," Sarah admitted. "We've barely figured out how to get to our own moon." More sounds of disbelief. One student, who looked like a mobile constellation, actually laughed, a sound like cosmic radiation set to music. "I see," Professor Void Seer said. "This will certainly make the course more interesting. Please, sit down. We shall begin with basic concepts that all students should find accessible, regardless of their species' technological limitations." The lecture that followed was simultaneously enlightening and humiliating. Professor Void Seer discussed fundamental forces that humans hadn't even discovered, demonstrated energy manipulation techniques that looked like magic, and casually referenced concepts that existed beyond the boundaries of human mathematics. Sarah took notes frantically, her neural interface helping her process information at speeds her natural brain never could have managed. But even with technological assistance, she was clearly struggling to keep up with material that her classmates found elementary. "For tomorrow's assignment," Professor Void Seer announced as the class period ended, "each student will demonstrate basic energy channeling by creating a simple force construct. The requirements are minimal, sufficient structural integrity to support its own weight and basic responsive properties. This should present no difficulty for students at your level." As the other students filed out, chattering excitedly about the assignment, Sarah remained in her seat, staring at her notes. Creating a force construct required abilities she didn't possess, using energies she couldn't perceive, through methods that violated everything she understood about physics. "Excuse me," said a voice beside her. Sarah looked up to see a student who appeared to be made of living crystal, with faceted surfaces that reflected light in impossible patterns. "I am Quindar of the Prismatic Collective." "I could not help but notice your distress." "I'm not distressed," Sarah said quickly. "I'm just strategically concerned." Quindar's crystalline form chimed with what her interface indicated was amusement. "I have heard of your species' reputation for determination. Perhaps that will serve you well here." "What reputation?" Sarah asked. "We're complete unknowns in the galaxy." "Not entirely unknown," Quindar replied. "There are stories passed down among the older civilizations, tales of a species that refuses to surrender even when faced with impossible odds. Most scholars consider them myths, but the crystal being's surfaces flickered thoughtfully. Perhaps they are more true than we realized." After Quindar left, Sarah sat alone in the empty classroom, trying to process everything that had happened. She was surrounded by beings with capabilities beyond her imagination, taking classes that assumed knowledge her species had never developed and expected to demonstrate abilities she couldn't even begin to understand. Her neural interface chimed with an incoming message. Academic counseling appointment scheduled for 0800 tomorrow. Report to Guidance Complex 12. Academic probation review pending. Academic probation, Sarah said aloud. I haven't even finished my first day and I'm already failing. But as she made her way back to her dormitory through corridors filled with students casually violating the laws of physics, Sarah felt something unexpected alongside her fear and frustration. It was the same feeling she'd had when she'd joined the debate team despite her terror of public speaking, or when she'd signed up for AP classes despite struggling with regular coursework. It was the stubborn human refusal to accept that something was impossible just because everyone said it was. Sarah Chan might not be able to manipulate energy or bend reality with her mind, but she had something that apparently none of these advanced civilizations had encountered before. The absolutely irrational human conviction that failure was just the first step toward eventually succeeding. As she lay in her alien bed, looking out at stars that belonged to no constellation she recognized, Sarah made a decision. She was going to find a way to pass every class, complete every assignment, and prove that humans belonged among the galaxy's elite. Not because it was logical or reasonable, but because the alternative was unacceptable. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of teaching the universe that sometimes the greatest power wasn't the ability to manipulate cosmic forces. Sometimes it was simply the refusal to quit when everyone expected you to fail. The Academy was about to learn what human stubbornness could accomplish when faced with the impossible, and Sarah had a feeling that lesson was going to surprise everyone, including herself. Sarah's academic counseling session took place in an office that existed in what her neural interface helpfully described as conceptual space, which meant the room's dimensions changed based on the occupant's psychological state. Since Sarah was experiencing roughly equal parts determination and terror, the office kept shifting between a cozy study and a vast examination chamber. Her counselor was a being called Mentor Calvanus, who appeared to be composed entirely of flowing golden light with occasional flashes of deep thought made visible. Calvanus had been reviewing Sarah's file for the past 10 minutes in silence that stretched like taffy. This is, Calvanus said finally, unprecedented. That seems to be the theme of my academy experience, Sarah replied, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice. You misunderstand. Your academic performance yesterday was indeed concerning. A complete failure to demonstrate any recognizable energy manipulation capabilities. However, your neural interface readings are extraordinary. Calvanus gestured, and holographic displays appeared, showing brain scan data that looked like someone had drawn lightning storms with mathematics. Your cognitive adaptation rate is off the charts. The interface integration that typically takes weeks happened in hours. Most remarkable of all, you're processing Academy instruction sets through completely novel neural pathways. Is that good or bad? Sarah asked. It is unprecedented, Calvanus repeated. Tell me, how did you approach Professor Voidseer's assignment last night? Sarah shifted uncomfortably in her chair, which responded by growing slightly taller. I may have taken a somewhat unconventional approach. Explain. Well, since I can't actually manipulate energy directly, I figured I had to work around the problem. I spent most of the night in the Academy's technical databases, learning about the fundamental principles that govern force constructs. Then I reverse-engineered the required mathematical frameworks and designed what is essentially a mechanical solution. Calvanus's golden form flickered with what might have been excitement. Show me. Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out what appeared to be a small, intricately folded structure made from cafeteria utensils, wire from her room's lighting fixture, and crystallized energy she'd somehow convinced the dormitory's food synthesizer to produce. When she set it on the desk, the structure unfolded itself into a perfect geometric form that hummed with contained power. I call it a force construct simulator, Sarah explained. It uses tiny mechanical actuators to mimic the structural properties Professor Voitsier described. The energy signature is created by redirecting the ambient power flowing through the Academy's infrastructure. To most sensors, it should read as a legitimate force construct. Calvanus extended a probe of golden light toward the device. After a moment of analysis, the counselor's form brightened considerably. This is remarkable. Not only does it meet the technical requirements of the assignment, but your energy redirection technique is completely unknown to Academy science. Where did you learn this methodology? I didn't learn it anywhere, Sarah said. I just figured it out. When you don't have the right tools for a job, you make do with what you have. It's called improvisation. Improvisation. Calvanus repeated the word like it was a foreign concept. Your species has a term for systematic problem solving using available resources rather than ideal capabilities? We have lots of terms for it. Making do, working around, thinking outside the box, MacGyvering something. Sarah stopped as she realized Calvanus was recording everything she said. Why are you looking at me like that? Sarah Chen, Calvanus said slowly, I believe we may have been approaching your education from entirely the wrong angle. Tell me, what do you know about the Academy's history? Nothing really. Just that it's been training the galaxy's best and brightest for 3,000 years. Indeed, and in those 3,000 years, our methods have remained essentially unchanged. We identify beings with natural talents, enhance those talents through advanced instruction, and produce graduates who excel within established paradigms. Calvanus paused, and the office around them shifted to show walls covered in equations and holographic models. What we have never attempted is to train someone who approaches problems from a fundamentally different perspective. Different how? Every species in the Academy possesses some form of natural ability that allows them to interact with cosmic forces directly. The Voidani manipulate space-time through consciousness. The Terranians channel stellar energy through their crystalline matrices. The Astral Dominion beings exist partially outside normal reality, but humans, Calvanus's form pulsed thoughtfully. Humans appear to lack any such natural interface with universal forces. Right, Sarah said. That's why I shouldn't be here. On the contrary, that may be exactly why you should be here. Tell me, what would happen if the Academy had a student who could achieve the same results as energy manipulators without actually manipulating energy? Sarah considered this. I guess they'd have someone who could work around problems that might stump traditional approaches. Precisely. Your force construct simulator is crude compared to what a trained energy manipulator could create, but it also operates on principles that are completely immune to energy-based countermeasures. Most Academy graduates become specialists who excel within their natural abilities but struggle when those abilities are unavailable. You, however, appear to be developing into something we've never seen. A generalist who can find solutions regardless of available resources. The implications of what Calvanus was suggesting began to sink in. You're talking about completely changing my curriculum, aren't you? I am proposing that we stop trying to teach you to be like everyone else and instead help you become the best version of what you already are. Calvanus gestured, and the office walls displayed what appeared to be an entirely new class schedule. Advanced problem solving through resource limitation, unconventional engineering applications, alternative energy theory, and my personal favorite, creative failure recovery. Sarah stared at the schedule. These aren't real classes, are they? They are now. If the Academy is going to train the first human student, we need to develop teaching methods appropriate for human capabilities. You'll still attend some standard courses, universal theory, academy history, diplomatic protocols, but your focus will be on developing your natural problem-solving abilities rather than trying to force you into conventional frameworks. Over the following weeks, Sarah's academy experience transformed from a daily exercise in humiliation into something approaching actual education. Her new professors included some of the Academy's most unconventional thinkers, beings who had spent their careers exploring the edges of possibility rather than perfecting established techniques. Professor Kethmore, who taught alternative energy theory, was a being composed of sentient mathematics who had never encountered a student unable to perceive energy directly. Their first lesson involved Sarah describing how humans use tools to accomplish tasks that other species performed through natural abilities. Fascinating, Professor Kethmore computed aloud as geometric patterns swirled around the classroom. Your species compensates for limited natural capabilities by creating external systems that replicate desired functions. Show me. Sarah pulled out her smartphone, one of the few Earth devices that still functioned thanks to her neural interfaces translation protocols. This device allows me to communicate across vast distances, access enormous databases of information, and perform complex calculations. We can't do any of those things naturally, so we built something that can. The mathematical patterns around Professor Kethmore intensified. And every member of your species has access to such devices? Most of us, yeah. We've built entire civilizations around the idea that if we can't do something naturally, we'll figure out how to do it artificially. Didge. Remarkable. This suggests your species has been practicing advanced problem-solving through resource limitation for centuries, without recognizing it as a formal discipline. Meanwhile, her creative failure recovery instructor, Dr. Nixara, was teaching Sarah concepts that seemed specifically designed for human psychology. Dr. Nixara was a shapeshifter whose natural form resembled a constantly changing cloud of possibilities, and they had spent considerable time studying how different species responded to setbacks. Most Academy students, Dr. Nixara explained while cycling through approximately 15 different physical configurations, are accustomed to success from an early age. When they encounter genuine failure, they often experience what we call paradigm collapse, the inability to function when their natural advantages are insufficient. But humans, according to your own descriptions, regularly encounter failure and continue functioning regardless. Well, yeah, Sarah said. If we stopped every time something didn't work, we'd still be living in caves. Exactly. This resilience to failure is extraordinarily rare among spacefaring species. Most civilizations develop advanced capabilities early and then optimize those capabilities rather than learning to overcome fundamental limitations. The more Sarah learned about galactic civilization, the more she realized how strange humanity really was. Most species had evolved some form of natural interface with cosmic forces, telepathy, energy manipulation, dimensional perception, or reality alteration. They built their civilizations around enhancing these natural gifts, creating societies where problems were solved by applying greater amounts of innate ability. Humans, by contrast, had no natural cosmic interface at all. They couldn't telepathically communicate, manipulate energy with their minds, or perceive dimensions beyond the basic three. Instead, they had developed something that apparently no other known species possessed: the systematic ability to solve problems using inadequate tools. This revelation led to Sarah's first major breakthrough, which occurred during a joint exercise with students from the conventional energy manipulation track. The assignment was to create a stable containment field for a sample of unstable exotic matter, a relatively simple task that involved channeling specific frequencies of cosmic energy to maintain molecular cohesion. Sarah watched her partner, a student named Vex Hal, who belonged to a species that looked like living aurora, effortlessly weave energy patterns that contained the exotic matter in a shimmering sphere of force. Your turn, Vex Hal said, offering Sarah control of the energy flows. I can't manipulate energy like that, Sarah explained, but maybe I can accomplish the same result differently. She pulled out her growing collection of improvised tools, items she had scavenged, traded for, or convinced the Academy's fabrication systems to produce. Working quickly, she assembled what appeared to be a mechanical cage around the exotic matter, but one that incorporated principles she had learned from studying how the Academy's own systems managed exotic materials. "What are you doing?" Vex Hall asked, their aurora form flickering with confusion. "I'm building a containment system that doesn't depend on energy manipulation," Sarah replied, fine-tuning a series of resonance generators she had constructed from cafeteria equipment and spare electronics.
The exotic matter is unstable because its molecular bonds are fluctuating.
If I can't stabilize them with energy, I can create a mechanical system that compensates for the fluctuations. When she activated her device, the exotic matter stabilized just as effectively as it had under Vexhal's energy manipulation, but the readings showed a completely different containment mechanism. "This should not be possible," Vexhal said, their form brightening with excitement. "You have created a stable containment field without using any energy manipulation whatsoever. How did you know this would work?" "I didn't know," Sarah admitted, "but I figured if I understood the problem well enough, I could find a way around it." Word of Sarah's unconventional solutions began spreading throughout the academy. Professors started attending each other's classes to observe the human student who solved problems through what they termed systematic resource inadequacy. Students from advanced tracks began requesting Sarah as a lab partner, curious to see how someone with no natural abilities could achieve comparable results. Not everyone was impressed. A group of students from the elite cosmic engineering track, led by a being called Zartex who appeared to be made of crystallized superiority, made it clear they considered Sarah's presence at the academy to be an ongoing joke. "Impressive toys," Zartex said one day, examining Sarah's latest project. A gravity simulation device built from dormitory furniture and reclaimed energy conduits. But what happens when you encounter a problem that cannot be solved with clever arrangements of junk? "I guess I'll figure that out when it happens," Sarah replied. How wonderfully naive. "Tell me, human, what do you intend to do for tomorrow's Advanced Energy Dynamics examination?" The test requires students to demonstrate mastery over at least 3 fundamental forces simultaneously. Even the most gifted students find it challenging. Unlike her specialized courses, which allowed for alternative approaches, the Academy's standard tests were designed around conventional abilities that she simply didn't possess. There was no mechanical workaround for demonstrating direct control over electromagnetic, gravitational. "I'll think of something," she said with more confidence than she felt. Zartex's crystalline form chimed with disdainful laughter. How refreshingly human. When faced with an impossible task, simply announce your intention to think of something. That night, Sarah sat in her room, staring at the examination requirements. The test would take place in a specialized chamber where students demonstrated their ability to simultaneously manipulate electromagnetic fields, gravitational forces, and nuclear binding energies. Success required precise control over cosmic forces at the most fundamental level, exactly the kind of direct energy manipulation that humans couldn't perform. Her neural interface provided access to 3,000 years of Academy records, showing examples of how different species had passed the examination. The Voidanae used consciousness-based reality alteration. The Terranians channeled stellar energy through crystalline matrices. The Astral Dominion students manipulated probability itself to achieve desired outcomes. None of these approaches would work for a human. But as Sarah studied the records more carefully, she began to notice something interesting. Every successful demonstration followed similar patterns: specific energy signatures, predictable field configurations, and standardized force interactions. The test wasn't really measuring creativity or problem-solving ability. It was measuring how effectively students could reproduce established techniques. And if there was one thing humans excelled at, it was reproducing desired outcomes through completely non-obvious methods. Sarah spent the rest of the night working, and by morning she had constructed what was arguably her most audacious project yet. It was a mechanical system that could simulate the energy signatures of 3 fundamental forces simultaneously, not by actually manipulating those forces, but by creating artificial patterns that would register correctly on the Academy's sensors. The device looked like a combination of abstract sculpture and mad science experiment, incorporating everything from her room's atmospheric recycling components to crystallized energy from the food synthesizers. It was held together with wire, determination, and what Sarah had come to think of as applied stubbornness. When examination time arrived, Sarah entered the testing chamber alongside Zarthex and 7 other students. The chamber was a sphere of pure energy where normal physics went to die, allowing for direct manipulation of fundamental forces without the interference of normal matter. One by one, the other students demonstrated their mastery. Zartex created a stunning display of interwoven forces that looked like a three-dimensional symphony composed of pure physics. The other students were equally impressive, weaving electromagnetic fields, gravitational waves, and nuclear binding energies into complex patterns that showcased both power and precision. Then it was Sarah's turn. She activated her device, and the chamber filled with energy signatures that perfectly matched the patterns created by the other students. To the Academy's sensors, it appeared that Sarah was demonstrating the same level of fundamental force mastery as beings who had been born with cosmic manipulation abilities. The testing AI confirmed her success with mechanical precision. Student Sarah Chen, adequate demonstration of electromagnetic manipulation, gravitational control, and nuclear binding energy management. Examination passed. As they exited the chamber, Zartex approached Sarah with an expression that might have been respect, confusion, or possibly nausea. "That was not real force manipulation," Zartex said. "No," Sarah agreed. "It wasn't. You created a mechanical simulation that reproduced the required energy signatures without actually controlling any fundamental forces." "Pretty much, yeah." Zartex was silent for a long moment. "This should not have been possible." "Probably not," Sarah said. "But it worked anyway." As word of Sarah's examination performance spread throughout the Academy, she realized that she had crossed some kind of threshold. She was no longer seen as the human who couldn't do what everyone else did naturally. Instead, she was becoming known as the student who could achieve impossible results through methods that redefined what possible actually meant. More importantly, Sarah was beginning to understand something that the Academy's 3,000 years of institutional wisdom had never encountered. Sometimes the greatest strength wasn't the ability to manipulate cosmic forces directly. Sometimes it was the refusal to accept that problems couldn't be solved just because the obvious solutions weren't available. The galaxy was about to learn that human stubbornness, applied systematically and with sufficient creativity, could accomplish things that violated everything they thought they knew about power, ability, and the nature of achievement itself. And Sarah Chen was just getting started. The Academy's emergency alarms sounded like the universe screaming in harmonics that somehow made perfect sense. With Trust Teddy, Sarah's neural interface translated the warning as she ran through corridors that were rearranging themselves to facilitate evacuation. Critical system failure, dimensional anchor destabilization. All students report to emergency stations. She had been in the middle of her advanced, unconventional problem-solving class when reality hiccuped and Professor Kethmore's mathematical form had suddenly collapsed into what appeared to be very concerned calculus. Now, as she joined the stream of students moving toward the designated safe zones, Sarah's interface was picking up fragments of panicked communications between Academy faculty. "The dimensional anchors are failing across the entire station," came a voice that identified itself as Dean Fluxthera. "Without stable anchoring, we'll drift into dimensional chaos within hours. Repair teams are unable to approach the anchor chambers," replied another voice. "The dimensional distortions are too severe for conventional energy manipulation." Sarah found herself in Emergency Station 7, a vast chamber that served as both gathering point and, if necessary, launch bay for evacuation ships. Around her, students from hundreds of species clustered in groups, their conversations a mixture of fear and technical speculation about the crisis. "What exactly are dimensional anchors?" Sarah asked Quindar, who had materialized beside her with their usual crystalline chiming. "They maintain the Academy's position in stable space-time," Quindar explained, their faceted surfaces reflecting the emergency lighting in patterns that suggested deep concern. "Without them, the station will drift through dimensional layers until it encounters a reality where the Academy cannot exist. And then we cease to exist along with it." The gravity of the situation became clearer as Sarah's interface fed her more technical details. The Academy existed in a carefully maintained pocket of stabilized space-time, anchored to reality by massive devices that required constant energy input and precise calibration. The anchor chambers were located at critical points throughout the station, each one surrounded by fields of distorted space that were apparently becoming more dangerous by the minute. "All senior students report to the main auditorium immediately," announced a voice that Sarah's interface identified as Chancellor Voidheart, the Academy's highest authority. "We require your assistance in developing solutions to the current crisis." Sarah followed the flow of students to the Academy's largest gathering space, a spherical chamber that could accommodate the wildly different physical requirements of tens of thousands of beings. The Chancellor appeared to be a living constellation, stars and nebulae arranged in a roughly humanoid configuration that suggested vast intelligence and barely controlled cosmic power. "Students," Chancellor Voidheart began, their voice resonating across dimensions simultaneously, "we face an unprecedented crisis. Our dimensional anchors are destabilizing due to cascade failures in their energy matrices. Traditional repair methods have proven ineffective due to the increasingly severe spatial distortions surrounding the anchor chambers. Holographic displays materialize throughout the auditorium, showing real-time images of the anchor chambers." Sarah gasped as she saw what the repair teams were facing. The chambers existed in states of twisted reality, where normal physics had given up and gone home. Walls curved in directions that didn't exist, energy patterns flowed backwards through time, and space itself seemed to be folding into origami shapes that hurt to contemplate. "We are requesting volunteer teams to attempt alternative approaches to the repairs," the Chancellor continued. "However, I must emphasize the extreme danger. The dimensional distortions are lethal to most forms of life and will destroy any conventional energy-based equipment." Students throughout the auditorium began forming teams based on their specializations and natural abilities. Sarah watched as groups of energy manipulators, dimensional engineers, and reality architects gathered to discuss approaches that involved increasingly complex manipulations of cosmic forces. Nobody approached Sarah. She stood alone in the vast chamber, watching as every other student found a team, while she remained the one being whose natural abilities were insufficient for the crisis at hand. Her unconventional problem-solving methods had earned her respect and academic success, but faced with a genuine emergency that threatened everyone's survival, she was exactly what she had always been. A human who couldn't manipulate energy, perceive dimensions, or alter reality through force of will. Sarah Chen. The voice belonged to Dean Fluxthara, who had approached without Sarah noticing. The Dean was a being of flowing temporal energy who existed slightly ahead of everyone else in time, allowing them to predict probable futures. "You appear to be unassigned to a repair team." "Yeah, well," Sarah said, trying to keep the bitterness out of her voice. "Turns out, systematic resource inadequacy isn't much help when the resource you need is the ability to survive in twisted space-time." "Perhaps not," Dean Fluxthara said. "However, I have been observing the probable outcomes of the various team approaches. The energy manipulation teams have a 12% chance of success. The dimensional engineering groups show a 15% probability. Even our most advanced reality architects are achieving only an 18% success probability. That's not encouraging, indeed, which is why I find myself wondering what probability assessment would emerge if we had a team member who approached the problem from an entirely different paradigm." Sarah looked at the Dean more carefully. "Are you asking me to volunteer for a repair mission that will probably kill me? I am suggesting that your unique problem-solving methodology might provide perspectives that conventional approaches cannot offer." "The decision, naturally, is yours." Sarah looked around the auditorium at the teams of brilliant beings developing sophisticated plans to manipulate cosmic forces in ways that redefined the possible. Then she thought about what would happen to all of them if those plans failed and the Academy drifted into dimensional chaos. "Which anchor chamber needs the most help?" she asked. "Anchor 7 is experiencing the most severe distortions." 3 teams have already attempted repairs and been forced to withdraw. The chamber exists in a state of reality so unstable that our sensors can barely maintain contact. Perfect, Sarah said. I'll take it. Dean Fluxthara's temporal form flickered with what might have been approval. I will assign you the most experienced guides available, students who can navigate dimensional distortions and provide life support in unstable environments. An hour later, Sarah found herself suited in an environmental protection system that looked like it had been designed by aliens who had very interesting ideas about human anatomy. Her team consisted of 3 other students: Vex Hall, the Aurora being who had become fascinated with her mechanical approaches; Creethax, the mathematical praying mantis from her arrival shuttle; and a new addition named Zephyriah, who appeared to be a sentient probability curve with strong opinions about causality. The approach corridor to Anchor 7 is currently experiencing Class 9 reality distortions, Vexhall explained as they moved through increasingly unstable sections of the Academy. Normal matter cannot maintain coherence in that environment. How long do we have once we enter the distortion field? Sarah asked. Approximately 12 minutes before our protective systems fail, Creethax calculated. Assuming, of course, that the mathematics governing our existence remain consistent throughout the approach, which they probably won't, Zephyriah added helpfully. The probability curves suggest a 73% chance that we'll encounter at least one pocket where cause and effect operate backwards. They reached the entrance to the approach corridor where a shimmering barrier marked the boundary between normal space and dimensional chaos. Through the barrier, Sarah could see a tunnel that appeared to be constructed from crystallized impossibility, with walls that moved in directions that made her brain hurt. Remember, Vexhall said, do not attempt to use any energy-based equipment once we cross the threshold. The distortions will corrupt any conventional technology. Good thing I don't use conventional technology, Sarah replied, checking the collection of mechanical devices she had hastily assembled for the mission. They crossed the threshold, and Sarah immediately understood why the previous teams had failed. The corridor existed in a state of reality so unstable that her neural interface began providing contradictory information about basic concepts like distance, time, and the number 3. Walking forward somehow moved them backwards, while her protective suit's readings suggested she was simultaneously freezing and burning in a vacuum filled with breathable atmosphere. The distortions are worse than predicted, Creetax announced, his mathematical form flickering as he struggled to maintain coherence. I am experiencing difficulty with basic arithmetic concepts. Stay together, Vexhall called, though their aurora form was becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish from the chaotic energy patterns surrounding them. The anchor chamber is approximately 30 meters ahead, possibly both. They pushed forward through increasingly impossible terrain, with Sarah relying on her mechanical compass, a device that operated on principles simple enough to function even when physics was having an identity crisis. The anchor chamber, when they finally reached it, defied description in ways that made the corridor seem perfectly normal by comparison. The chamber was a sphere approximately 50 meters in diameter, but it was also somehow both infinite and smaller than an atom. The dimensional anchor itself appeared to be a construct of pure mathematics that someone had convinced to exist in physical space, but the energy matrices that powered it were flickering in and out of reality like cosmic hiccups. The primary energy coupling has destabilized. If we can recalibrate the input frequencies, the anchor should restabilize. How? Sarah asked. Standard procedure requires direct energy manipulation to adjust the frequency matrices, Creetax explained. However, the distortions make such manipulation impossible. Any energy we channel will be corrupted and likely make the situation worse. Sarah studied the anchor mechanism, her neural interface providing technical specifications that shifted and changed as local reality fluctuated. The device was incredibly complex, but at its core it was doing something fundamentally simple. The problem was that the input frequencies had drifted out of alignment, and the distortions prevented direct recalibration. What if we don't recalibrate the input frequencies? Sarah asked. What if we change how the anchor interprets the existing input? I do not understand, Vexall said. Sarah began unpacking her equipment, a collection of mechanical devices built from Academy components according to principles that had nothing to do with energy manipulation. The anchor is trying to process input frequencies that are no longer correct. Instead of fixing the input, what if we build a mechanical interface that translates the existing frequencies into what the anchor expects? She worked quickly, assembling a device that looked like the unholy offspring of a clockwork engine and a mathematical proof. The device was designed to intercept the distorted energy flowing into the anchor, mechanically process it to remove the distortions, and then feed clean energy into the dimensional stabilization system. This approach should not be possible, Krethax observed as Sarah connected her mechanical interface to the anchor's energy coupling. You are attempting to solve a purely energy-based problem with mechanical computation. Maybe, Sarah said, making final adjustments to her device. Or maybe I'm solving a mechanical problem that everyone assumes has to be energy-based. She activated her mechanical interface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the anchor's energy matrices began to stabilize, their flickering subsiding as Sarah's device filtered and translated the distorted input into usable power. The dimensional distortions in the chamber began to weaken, reality asserting itself more consistently as the anchor regained its hold on stable space-time. It's working, Vexall announced, their aurora form brightening with excitement. The dimensional stability is returning to normal parameters. Probability curves are converging toward baseline reality, Zephyriah confirmed. The anchor is holding steady. As they made their way back through the approach corridor, which was now merely uncomfortably twisted rather than utterly impossible, Sarah found herself thinking about what had just happened. She had solved a problem that defeated some of the galaxy's most advanced beings, not by doing something impossible, but by refusing to accept that the problem had to be approached in the obvious way. When they emerged from the dimensional distortion field, they found the Academy's emergency response teams waiting anxiously for their return. Dean Fluxthara approached immediately, their temporal form vibrating with relief. Anchor 7 has stabilized, the Dean announced. The dimensional distortions are subsiding and our reality anchoring is returning to normal parameters. How did you accomplish this? I didn't try to fix the energy distortions, Sarah explained. I built a mechanical system to work around them. Show me, said a new voice. Chancellor Voidheart had arrived, their constellation form dimmed with exhaustion and stress. Demonstrate how you achieved success where conventional methods failed. Sarah pulled out a simplified version of the device she had built in the anchor chamber. The problem wasn't really the energy distortions. It was that everyone was trying to fix the distortions directly. But if you approach it as a translation problem instead of a power problem, you can build a mechanical interface that converts distorted energy into clean energy without having to manipulate the energy itself. She activated the demonstration device, showing how mechanical computation could solve problems that everyone assumed required energy manipulation. Remarkable, Chancellor Voidheart said. You have developed an entirely new approach to dimensional engineering. This methodology could revolutionize how we handle reality distortions across the galaxy. Word of Sarah's success spread throughout the Academy with remarkable speed, and she soon found herself at the center of attention that was both thrilling and terrifying. Students and faculty who had previously dismissed her as an amusing anomaly now wanted to understand her problem-solving methodologies. The Academy's research departments requested permission to study her techniques, and several galactic civilizations sent representatives asking about human engineering approaches. Most importantly, Chancellor Voidheart formally announced that Sarah's unconventional methods would be integrated into the Academy's core curriculum. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Academy was expanding its fundamental approach to include techniques that didn't rely on natural cosmic abilities. What you have accomplished, the Chancellor told Sarah in a private meeting, you have demonstrated that our assumptions about power, ability, and problem-solving were dangerously limited. The Academy has been training beings to excel within established paradigms, but you have shown us the value of approaching problems from entirely different perspectives. I just figured out how to work around my limitations, Sarah replied. Precisely. And in doing so, you have revealed that what we considered limitations might actually be unique strengths. Your species' lack of natural cosmic abilities has forced you to develop problem-solving methodologies that no other civilization has needed to explore. As Sarah returned to her dormitory that evening, she realized that something fundamental had changed. She was no longer the human who didn't belong at the academy. She had become the human who was teaching the academy new ways to understand what was possible. But the real revelation came in a message waiting in her neural interface, a communication from the Galactic Council itself. The message was brief and formal, but its implications were staggering. The Academy's recent crisis and its resolution have drawn the attention of the Council's emergency response protocols. The methodologies developed by student Sarah Chen represent potential solutions to several galaxy-wide problems that have previously been considered unsolvable. A formal presentation to the Council has been requested. Attendance is mandatory. Sarah stared at the message, trying to process what it meant. The Galactic Council was the governing body for thousands of civilizations across the galaxy. They were beings of unimaginable power and intelligence who shaped the fate of entire star systems. And they wanted to learn from a human who solved problems by building machines out of cafeteria equipment. As she prepared for sleep in her impossible academy dormitory, looking out at stars that belonged to civilization she was apparently about to meet, 6 months ago, she had been a struggling high school student who couldn't pass a physics test. Now she was being summoned to present problem-solving methodologies to the rulers of the galaxy. Tomorrow, she would begin preparing for what might be the most important presentation in human history. But tonight, Sarah Chen, the girl who had accidentally enrolled in the galaxy's most elite academy and turned into something nobody had expected, allowed herself to feel proud of how far she had come. The universe was about to discover that sometimes the greatest revelations came not from the beings who could reshape reality with their minds, but from someone stubborn enough to keep building mechanical solutions until the impossible became merely difficult. And Sarah was just getting started on showing the galaxy what human determination could accomplish when applied systematically, creatively, and with complete disregard for what everyone else considered possible. The council chamber existed in a space that made the academy look like a simple building project. Sarah stood on a platform that floated in what appeared to be a miniature galaxy with stars and nebulae arranged in patterns that suggested both cosmic beauty and terrifying intelligence. Trust Teddy. Around her, on similar platforms distributed through three-dimensional space, sat the representatives of the Galactic Council. Each council member was a being of such advanced development that Sarah's neural interface struggled to provide adequate translations for what she was seeing. There was Eternal Prime Aethon, who appeared to be a living equation that had achieved consciousness and decided to govern a few thousand star systems as a hobby. Void Empress Nulthiara existed as a region of space where things ceased to exist in precisely the right way to maintain galactic stability. Council Elder Zixmath was apparently made of crystallized time itself, their presence causing small temporal eddies that made Sarah's watch run backwards. Sarah Chen of Earth, spoke a voice that somehow came from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, approached the presentation sphere. A transparent bubble materialized around Sarah's platform, and she found herself floating toward the center of the council chamber while trying not to think about the fact that she was essentially giving a PowerPoint presentation to beings who could destroy solar systems by accident. Council members, Sarah began, her voice amplified through the chamber's impossible acoustics. 6 months ago, I couldn't pass a basic physics test. Today, I'm here to discuss problem-solving methodologies that apparently don't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. If that's not a testament to the power of human stubbornness, I don't know what is. A sound that might have been cosmic laughter rippled through the chamber. Before I explain how I've been solving problems at the Academy, Sarah continued, I think it's important to understand what makes humans different from every other species you've encountered. We evolved on a world that was trying to kill us pretty much constantly, and we had absolutely no natural abilities that would help us survive. No telepathy, no energy manipulation, no dimensional perception. What we had instead was the capacity to look at any problem and ask, what if we tried this completely ridiculous approach that nobody else has thought of? Her presentation platform began displaying holographic images as Sarah spoke, scenes from human history showing her species' progression from cave dwellers to space explorers, all accomplished without a single natural cosmic ability. Humans have been practicing what I call systematic resource inadequacy for our entire evolutionary history, Sarah explained. When we couldn't run fast enough to catch prey, we threw rocks. When rocks weren't effective enough, we invented spears. When spears weren't sufficient, we developed agriculture so we wouldn't need to hunt. Every solution created new problems, and every new problem forced us to become more creative about finding solutions. Eternal Prime Athon manifested a communication that Sarah's interface translated as profound mathematical interest. You describe a species that evolves not through developing greater natural capabilities, but through systematically circumventing natural limitations.
Exactly, Sarah replied, and that's what I've been doing at the Academy.
When I couldn't manipulate energy directly, I built mechanical systems that achieved the same results. When I couldn't perceive dimensions, I developed mathematical models that let me work with dimensional effects indirectly. When I couldn't channel cosmic forces, I found ways to redirect and utilize ambient cosmic energy that was already available. The presentation sphere around Sarah, mistakenly enrolled, she turns into a miracle girl. The galaxy's strongest academy must confront her. HFY.